this activism, this whackery and wokery, has pervaded, frankly, education. And I'm wondering where a Conservative Party, which had an 80-seat majority, is.
Yes, well, that's a very good point. Yes, I do think parents should have more control and more rights. I mean, fundamentally, I think in this country, we have an understanding that bringing up children in terms of their values, in terms of sex and relationships, is primarily the responsibility of family and community, not the state. And I think we're moving towards a time when perhaps the state is considering itself responsible for educating children on values, and that's very dangerous. So yes, parents should have more rights in this, but one of the problems is that they don't know what their children are being taught, because I've heard of numerous examples, and in fact one was reported last weekend, the case of Claire Page, where parents have asked schools to provide them with materials that are being used to their children, and their children have refused, and the schools have refused on the grounds of copyright. That's deeply worrying, and I'm very much hoping the government's going to do something about that. Certainly there's been an amendment brought in the House of Lords to the schools bill that would try and sort that problem out. But if parents don't know what their children are being taught, how do they know what to withdraw their children from? And unfortunately, it's not just the case that this is just about sex education. As you say, some of these ideologies are being pushed throughout the curriculum in history. I've even seen a maths lesson about non-binary that's been used to push gender ideology. So parents obviously can't withdraw their children from maths. The answer has to be that we get this kind of inappropriate and inaccurate material out of schools. And that's ultimately the government's responsibility to make sure that happens.
I mean, Miriam, I doubt many of my viewers aren't of the view that, frankly, if you're wanting to talk to children as young as those that you've just described about these issues around sex and gender, what's going on? Like, why would you even want to talk to a child about these topics?
Well, I think there are genuinely some very well-meaning people out there who believe that preparing children early, before they meet some of these ideas and on the internet, for example, so preparing them by teaching them in the classroom. And I can understand that. We cannot forget about the role of the internet in this. 50% of 14-year-olds have seen pornography on the internet. It is absolutely the case now that children are being exposed to sexual material at a very early age. So I can understand that point of view. But I do think actually it's part of a broader agenda to adultify children, to push on them adult political concerns. So this perhaps started with climate catastrophism. Of course, we should be concerned about climate change. Of course, as adults, we should take responsibility for that. But should we be teaching children that the world's going to end, that it's a catastrophe, that adults are evil? We moved on to critical race theory, and now we're on gender ideology. These are adult political concerns that it's right for adults to talk about, but it's wrong to push them on children and use children as pawns in this political activism. And one example of that is schools that celebrate Diversity Week during Pride Month. Now, it's fantastic that schools teach about tolerance and respect and diversity. That's really positive, and of course we want schools to teach about that. But when we think about what the LGBTQIA+ movement is, it's a movement about adult sexual liberation. And of course, adults should be concerned about those things. But should we be asking children as young as 11 to align themselves with that kind of political activism? Is that right? Is that actually sexualizing children in itself? And these are the kind of questions that I think schools need to step back from, instead of just thinking, this is the kind thing to do, this is the politically correct thing to do. Is this best for children? Is this appropriate for children? Or actually, should we be protecting children from these kind of adult ideologies?